Hi, my name is Vig, and this is another episode of Quick Draw, where I talk about small interesting things that I find in film. We're continuing on with the month of Eastwood on the channel with our second installment. Be sure to check out the first one on the Mule if you haven't done so already. But today we're going to be focusing on a sequel that I didn't expect to love as much when I first gave it a shot. But sometimes things just work a little better the second time around. Like Ben Affleck and J-Lo. The most popular character that Eastwood has ever played is probably the man with no name in Sergio Leone's legendary Dollars trilogy. The second most popular character, however, is none other than Dirty Harry. Dirty Harry, or Harry Callahan as he's more commonly referred to throughout the series, maintains most of the behaviors you've come to know and love from the actor who plays him. Rules? Not for me. Partners? I work alone. The system? Here's a visual illustration of what I think about your damn system. But honestly, that's part of the charm of watching the character. There's a fun silliness in watching this vigilante cop blowing up half a city block to stop a bank robbery, disregarding orders to perform ridiculous stunts, and handing out satisfying verbal smackdowns to ineffectual bureaucrats.
Well, a naked man is chasing a woman through an alley with a butcher knife and a heart on. I figure he isn't out collecting for the Red Cross.
I think he's got a point.
He fulfills a certain fantasy in all of us to do the right thing, unrestrained by the slowness and imperfections that come with traditional justice. Dirty Harry was a hugely successful film, both financially, where it earned 9 times its budget at the box office, but also culturally among filmmakers, where it popularized tropes such as the lone wolf cop persona that would become so familiar in the decades to come.
So obviously when you then see your idol coming up with a movie like Dirty Harry and creating a whole new standard in action movies, and also to do it with a certain style and the way he played it with a certain characteristics and lines that were memorable lines, I said to myself, that's what I have to do.
With such great success of this magnitude, the development of a sequel around the corner was all but inevitable. And that brings us to the subject of this video, where we discuss why that very sequel, titled Magnum Force, is such a great follow-up to the original Don Siegel classic, and in my humble opinion, the best of the entire series. Magnum Force picks up some indeterminate time after the first film and opens to a courtroom scene where a mobster is acquitted of mass murder charges because of a legal technicality. It's a scene that feels familiar because it not so subtly calls back to the Scorpio Killer's release in the first film because of a legal technicality as well.
But it's inadmissible as evidence.
And who says that?
It's the law.
Well, then the law is crazy.
Okay, it was police brutality, which is pretty bad and not exactly a legal technicality, but you get the point, something that let a criminal off the hook from the punishment that they deserved. The mobster and his merry entourage celebrate their gaming of the system, till a rogue traffic cop crashes their party and thus kicking off a killing spree of similar murders across the city of seemingly bad guys who also got away with committing horrific crimes. Harry Callahan is of course brought in to help, and through the course of his investigation, unravels a vast conspiracy. He discovers that a group of young traffic cops led by the police chief are the true perpetrators of these crimes, aiming to take justice into their own hands after the system has repeatedly failed to deliver.
We're simply ridding society of killers that would be caught and sentenced anyway if our courts worked properly.
What a crazy idea! Who could have inspired such a thought process? Yes, Magnum Force is essentially the cinematic version of the Spider-Man meme, where Harry is forced to confront the not-so-drastic radicalization of his own methodology. And that's what makes it such an interesting film. Where the first was so confidently machismo and frankly fascist in its politics, root out crime no matter the cost with extreme disregard for the law.
What I'm saying is that man had rights.
Well, I'm all broken up about that man's rights.
The second is far more introspective, understanding that, hey, maybe operating as an unchecked judge, jury, and executioner isn't at all better than the imperfect system you're aiming to replace.
I hate the goddamn system, but until someone comes along with some changes that make sense, I'll stick with it.
To me, Magnum Force is almost like Eastwood's direct confrontation with the archetype he's played throughout his entire career, the vigilante who dishes out punishment where the traditional methods of law have failed to do so. He's played this character time and time and time again. It would have been so easy for the film to continue with this in mind and do what many sequels do, retread on the same ground as the first film, have Harry solve the case of a different murderer whose motives are clearly harmful and nefarious. And sadly, some of the following entries in the series do just that. But Magnum Force deconstructs that idea of the Eastwoodian archetype and places an asterisk next to its philosophy. It says, yeah, we get that it's satisfying to take action into your own hands, but even with that, there's a limit to what's acceptable. And maybe, just maybe, your raging contempt for the system can inspire a barbaric vigilantism that's worse than what you're trying to combat in the first place. Really not such a far-fetched idea in today's times.
It's not just a question of whether or not to use violence. There simply is no other way, Inspector. You, of all people, should understand that.
Of course, introspection is a common theme among Eastwood's works. Unforgiven's revisionist take on the Western genre frames the renegade gunslingers of his younger films as nothing more than embellished myths, who end up remorseful for the horrors they committed in killing their fellow man. And Mystic Pizza, or Mystic River, perhaps takes the concept of street justice bad to its most fully realized form, where the pursuit of vengeance leads to the tragic loss of an innocent life. But it's interesting to see the roots of that sort of self-reflection begin as early as 1973, really the peak of Eastwood's popularity, and kind of funny that it may have started with a frickin' Dirty Harry film. Magnum Force has many visual thrills, fun action sequences, and trademark quotable moments.
Man's got to know his limitations.
But what makes it stand apart from the rest of the series is that it forces Harry to confront and question whether his righteous individual ideology does more harm than good. And by extension, forces Eastwood, the filmmaker, to do the same.